Okay, I want to welcome everyone here to the Exodus Tabernacle, Believing Moses' Instructions. I want to start out asking you a few questions. Do you believe in the story of the Exodus? Do you believe the people of God were enslaved and oppressed? Do you believe that God decimated Egypt to liberate them with 10 deadly plagues? Do you believe that Israel was delivered from Egypt after he split the sea? Do you believe that God spoke to Moses and all of Israel at Mount Sinai? Do you believe that Moses received more than just 10 words? Do you believe that Israel received exact, useful, intelligent, and inspired plans to build God's dwelling place in their midst? Hopefully you believe that God's instructions were of divine caliber, because this is exactly what I believe. But I fear that we might interpret these instructions a little differently. This is how differently we probably interpret the instructions. On the left is tradition, of course, and on the right is exactly what I'm proposing. Why am I proposing this? Because I believe Moses' instructions. I believe them very literally. So we're basically going to be exploring some of those instructions today. My name is Andrew Hoy. I am the founder of Project 314, which was created for purposes of tabernacle research and restoration. Okay, to begin to understand why I believe the tabernacle needs to be researched and restored, you first have to come to understand the tabernacle as it's traditionally depicted or represented or perceived anyway, and I would argue grossly misrepresented. Has anyone here tried doing a search using internet image searches for tabernacle? Again, the tabernacle in Hebrew is Mishkan, and what we have here is a variation of ways that it's commonly depicted. Now, people don't argue too ferociously over whether it's a sloped roof or a flat roof. Most conventionally, they show the flat or slightly pitched. But this is one of the details, one of the many details that's revealed in so many ways in Scripture, and we have to flush all that out. So is the tabernacle just a bunch of useless ancient trivia? I think that's the impression that a lot of people have. Have the tabernacle interpretation differences ever resulted in any religious schisms over the course of history? You know, people argue about baptism and communion and election and that sort of thing. What about the tabernacle? Do people argue over it? I haven't heard of any denominations or Jewish sects believing one thing over the next and causing it to argue and divide, which I think is kind of interesting. I think it's treated with gross indifference, actually. So the question in the Christian camp, of course, is this a salvation issue? You know, people think that if it's not related to salvation, then it's something that we don't have to not only study, but or not only agree on, but actually study. We can just ignore it altogether. You know, is the roof flat or sloped? These are, again, thought to be trivia. So is it X or Y? Is it square or rectangular or triangular in its shape? Again, almost nobody cares about this, and everyone assumes it just doesn't matter. This indifference kind of dates back 3,500 years, you could say. Did Moses' tabernacle instructions matter to ancient Israel back 3,500 years ago? Moses was given some very exacting instructions on Mount Sinai, and those are basically in Exodus 25 through 27. And Israel, of course, didn't wait to hear them. And at the bottom of the hill, bottom of Mount Sinai, they end up worshiping in their own way instead. Of course, we got the golden calf event that happened in between the receiving of those tabernacle instructions and the actual building of the tabernacle. So again, this is what Israel put their hands and minds to, and hearts and minds to, before they did the right thing. So getting into the public responses, can you imagine if the Almighty said, "Make my tabernacle in the exact way that I say to make it"? And then the people responded saying, It really doesn't matter how we do it, and it just isn't that important. And whether we use the verb is or was there, present or past tense. Again, is this not a common sentiment today about this? It's like, well, it really didn't matter. It's like, well, if it didn't matter, then why did he do this? So are God's commandments less important if they're not emanating from a mountaintop lit ablaze with fire and lightning, or in a thundering voice from heaven? So are we looking at, are we giving the same amount of reverence to this recorded text as we might if we were watching the fireworks on the mountain? So again, why care about this? Why care about the tabernacle? One thing, I guess I bring this front and center, is a matter of authority. Thus saith the Lord, or saith the Lord, past tense, of course. He said this is important. Also, there's a matter of source. Of course, this is, again, the Almighty who is revealing these plans for this tentative meeting. We have the issue of uniqueness. It's the only thing in the entire Bible, apart from Noah's Ark, that the Almighty ever told his people to build. I think that should weigh heavily, as we ponder buildings of churches and synagogues and other, religious shrines. We have a meeting is another important purpose with it. We have festive days. This is where the divine presence came to rest. So again, very important thing, very important idea. Revelation, we have the notion that divine inspiration expands our understanding. We have the idea of prophecy. Prophecy is rooted in here. We have typology, shadow pictures, numerology, Paleo Hebrew. There's all sorts of really rich depth in this structure. As far as instructions, this is again a good teaching tool for teaching even young kids how to build things. We have governance, the idea of a centralized divine authority, again all locus at the tabernacle, and we have the idea of character. So this house is literally made in God's image, and this is what the chief architect is. His name is related, Bezalel. House in God's image is kind of what that implies. And then we have the issue of reputation. The design of this tabernacle is indicative of hopefully an intelligent and competent deity, right? So my question, should religious artwork be taken seriously? A lot of times the most basic details are really not presented accurately. They're more like religious cartoons. I even hate to say the word Noah in the context of showing you this house with a hinged roof, because it's just so absurd with all the animals. I mean, it looks more like a kid's toy chest or something like that. But a lot of these details are really poorly conveyed or represented in the Bible-based art. We got object scale, material types, item quantities, component sizes, hardware function, equipment weights, all that stuff. That's all implied within these different drawings. And what we'll see here is in a lot of this stuff, and a lot of this art's 100, 200 years old, but it really hasn't left the religious, the church's imagination, or within Judaism for that matter as well, because these images, they take hold in the mind. So this one I would entitle Chaos and Worship. If you look at all the busyness kind of going on there, I don't know what the original one is called here, but it's interesting. We got slaughter happening right at the entrance of this tabernacle here, when in fact they were told to slaughter basically at the entrance of the courtyard. We have a misplaced or spare altar, and as you might recall, the water basin is supposed to be on the other side of the altar. So there's just some really practical things. So right now they're going to be making a mess, whether you're looking at animal waste or slaughter. You're looking at making a mess right in front of his house. So if the priests are using the basin to wash their feet and go in, what kind of sense does it make to have the rest of it more like a pasture land? Here's a picture from the Holman Bible, and also a Jewish Encyclopedia of Art. Actually, or I'm sorry, it's art from that Encyclopedia and Bible. And if you look at them, they'll appear mirror imaged actually. And I say mirror imaged because they're presenting one as a left hand, one as a right hand. And it's that kind of thoughtless plagiarism that they've been engaged in. We have the location of these wood posts, the sizes, locations, quantities, all this, it doesn't meet Exodus descriptions. Here's another piece of art that came out of a Holman Bible, 1800s era. We got a zero roof slope. So we got a perfectly flat rooftop on a tent. That doesn't make any sense. And of course, we got nearby, they add round tents, which I think is kind of comical. These are conical shaped, which I don't know what that speaks to, if the artist is laughing at us or just what there. We have these really massive long, if you can imagine what a long beam that is, a continuous beam, that's being up there. Another important detail is this Exodus 27 doesn't mention any wood. So if this isn't made out of wood, that's a whole lot of metal. It's an insane amount of metal. You can see kind of a body scale. You can use the human beings as scales for how big they are. So this court is 2 to 3 times taller than a person. Again, this is not what the Bible talks about. It talks about a 5 cubit court height, and that's again well in excess of 5 cubits. Here we have a similar problem. We've got these massive, what would be silver caps sitting on top of these posts. Well, first of all, it's going to make the post awful top heavy. Another thing, it's going to be hundreds of pounds to lift it up there. They're only given 1775 shekels for all of them around the court, which is probably 40 or 50 pounds. So each of these is going to be about a pound of silver. So does this accurately depict what a pound of silver would be? Again, it's just more one absurdity stacked on the next. So here we've got the classic shoebox unit that is. We've got I call it the shoebox unit anyway. We got a full wood panel roof being put on top of this thing. And again, this is without any Exodus Bible precedent. So there's no mention of a planked roof. It's just typically represented as a 4-layer roof of fabrics and leathers. We've got massive beams and pillars that are in excess of 50% larger than what a cubit standard would allow. Again, we're using our guys right down here for scale. So, this would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 feet, where, the most extreme case could be 20 feet. It's just little details like that, again, they just say, well, it's really not that important. And all that stuff starts to add up after a while. Here they got a cage around the altar of some sort. I don't know. It reminds me of a thing to keep your pets in your kitchen, or your kids from tumbling down the stairs, or toddlers. And here they've added a floor platform of some sort. And this floor platform, if you compare that to the size of a leg, this would be almost up to someone's knee. So if you can imagine just a planked floor of that thick, going that far back. This is a massive amount of wood we're talking about. This is pure religious fiction. Here, these are metal bases here and here. And so if you compare it to the size of a guy, again, you're looking at metal bases, probably close to 5 feet. These would be many, many tons, and you're only given, 75 pounds of metal for that. So this is based on a 36-inch cubit, which is, that again is a fictional cubit. Most people would say a cubit is 18 inches or 20, 21 inches, possibly up to 25, but no one would propose 36. But that's, if you take a look at the scaling, that's kind of really what they're calling for here. The courtyard here is disproportionately small. So on one hand, you got this thing set in super jumbo size, and then the courtyard around it is it's minuscule. I understand this drawing's in perspective, but It's just exaggerated beyond sanity. How does this translate in real life? We have a real life structural and stability problems. This is a German-built model. It's in Israel. It's in Timnah, Israel. I actually toured this in person. You can see there's like a ribbing on the sides of the ribbings on the sides of the outer layer. And what these ribs are made of is it's like a galvanized steel strut. I don't think Moses used galvanized steel struts that then are anchored into. They got this structure anchored into the ground. I don't know if the person there told me it was 8 feet deep or 6 feet deep or something pretty extreme, really. So. What else do we have here? We have they swap metal for wood and wood for metal. So in certain places they got bars running along the horizontal side of this that are metal, when in fact the scripture calls for wood. And again, they're using these bases. They make mock-ups out of wood instead of metal because the metal would just be absurdly heavy, and they know it. So what's the nature of this problem? Are religious people not smart, or are smart people not religious? I mean, where's this gap of intellect occurring between the reconciling the scriptures, or is this something we should be blaming the Almighty on? So, it's said that laughter is good for the soul, but when the secular world sees absurd religious artwork, are they more likely to laugh with you or at you? I think they're more likely to laugh at you. And then this translates, of course, to the Almighty, because when the secular world laughs at that which is religious, they're laughing at the Creator. Do unrealistic images not profane the sacred name? So I think that sacred place restoration is really synonymous with the sacred name restoration. I think the Hebrew bears that out. I'm not going to get into that right now, but hopefully another time on that. Our image of the tabernacle, God's dwelling place, I think should be further researched before it can be restored. But if we search the scriptures and the internet more extensively, I think we can arrive at something more accurate, more honest. So again, this idea of an intelligent designer, what strikes you as more intelligent? Actually, if you go to a Google search, you might find the Dome Tabernacle on one of the pages in the search engine. It's made its way down since its original debut and Breaking Israel News publication, but you probably will still find it there. And I guess hopefully if you guys can share all the the website stuff as much as you can, we want to keep that up higher on the level so people are able to get a different viewpoint of that. So again, if this is a house made in the image of the eternal God, then shouldn't the nature of that be resembling? I think with it being circular, it's another suggestion, really. So how does this compare to ancient dwellings? We've got nomadic tribes and different cultures of the world. How are they building over the course of history? We've got in the Pacific Islands, the Samoan Pacific Islanders are building sugar cane leaf fail-telly domes. We got the American Eskimo, of course, making a snow igloo dome. We have why a dome, round structures have always been balanced. They give you a perfect equilibrium. Bark-walled dome lodge is another way that the Native Americans built, apart from teepees, of course. Teepees being more conical, but they have the same idea. The earth lodges, also other Indian designs, adobes, and wigwams. All these different structures. So in Europe, we've got Nordic Laplanders building the round lavu and goati. Again, in this windy climate, you have the idea of round shapes. They're passing winds on the plains equally in all directions, instead of something that's flat like a billboard is going to want to get blown over. We got conical timber and earth, coastal crannog in the Scottish Isle. again, the Nigerians are building round stick mud thatched roof huts. In Sri Lanka, we've got a religious structure here, the Buddhist stupa temple dome. We got the Mongolian yurt shrine. So present day, they're using these as Buddhist monasteries. Genghis Khan conquered, or said to have conquered, Asia in a yurt drawn by like 32 oxen or something like that. Round, of course, is defensible in all directions, and that's one reason a bird would build a nest that way. It's also even heat distribution, for something heating in the center. So, again, to this day, they're using yurts, and for good reason. Another word for yurt is ger. Ger is a Hebrew word for sojourner. And so we see, they're making these in accordion frames, so not really structurally stable, but they're very lightweight, making them ideal for sojourning. Again, the dome tents have great strength to weight ratio, or weight to size ratio. In other words, very little material can be used to spread out, very efficiently. And that's what you're doing when you're camping. Nobody wants to carry, lug around, or dare I say, schlep around, thousands of tons of material just to make a really small structure. So now again, we come back to the Israelite nomads. Would the Hebrew people be building differently? Did the people did the nomads get their idea how to build this from the Hebrews, or vice versa? So my question, do we get lost in another Egyptian exile? Thinking in terms of what I call the shoebox versus the dome, which is truer to history and world histories and world cultures. So this is where it stops with a lot of people, and this is really a shame that it stops where it does. We'll play Stump the Engineer. People will come up and say, well, neither the tabernacle nor the courtyard could possibly be round. Exodus 27 clearly describes a rectangular structure that measures 100 by 50 cubits. And so Exodus 27:18, well, they're right about what the English Bible says. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, and the breadth 50 everywhere, and the height 5 cubits. So here seems to be, nail in the coffin. Oh, this is worthy of the death of the project, and I'm, as an engineer, I'm such an idiot that I can't even figure this verse out. This is kind of the level of shame and scoffing that some people receive this content with. So again, they say, it's clearly a rectangle, case closed, don't need to look any farther. Not even going to hear anything more, right? So what about the issue of translations? What about the issue of context? And what about defining measurement reference points? Everything that's measured is reference. So if I measure a basketball, it's 8 inches in diameter. It's a sphere, of course. But if I told you it's 8 by 8 by 8, does it make it a cube? Hopefully not, right? So this is, again, a matter of language and reference and what they're measuring. So when in history was the tabernacle idea first introduced? We go back to Exodus 5, and I think it's first hinted in Exodus 5, where Moses is before Pharaoh. So we have Moses and Pharaoh is saying or Moses and Aaron are saying to Pharaoh, "Let my people go, so that what?" And in Hebrew, we've got this idea of so that they may have a festival to me, Yachagu in Hebrew. So Chag is referring to a circle, or Chagag is the real root of Chag. And so when they say Chag Sameach, that it's basically saying, happy holiday. But the holiday, again, ultimately referring to a circle or a circuit. So the idea of to march in a sacred procession, to observe a festival, but to move in a circle, that is part of the definition. So I think it's a little bit of a wink and a hint that we see back in Exodus 5. So what are your favorite scriptures to read? Everyone here like reading Bible genealogies? How about names in the Bible? That's probably another favorite. What about the census, or perhaps instructions on how to sacrifice? Nobody likes to read certain parts of the Bible, in all fairness, to be honest on this. And if you don't understand why you're reading parts of it, it's not always intuitive. But have you ever really tried to read the instructions, paying really careful to to these details? I'm assuming you guys have tried putting something together without paying attention to the instructions. You remember how that turned out, right? You get this IKEA furniture. It could be something simple, a bookshelf or a desk. You got a bag of parts, and it's like, well, you start matching things up, and you just go to town, only to realize it's like, oh, I guess I forgot step 3, and then you're on step 20. Then you got to go and disassemble the whole thing, because why? You didn't have the patience to, or the discipline to read the instructions first. So I'm guessing that just about everyone here listening can relate to that experience. So now we're looking at doing Exodus instruction time. Has anyone ever tried following the Exodus instructions for the tabernacle without the use of pre-existing visual aids? Most people probably not. And the first time I tried doing it, it was 7 years ago. So, I'd read the Bible over, a couple times, but I'd never thought of stopping and really digesting this in fullness. And there's a lot of people who might do once a year reads of the Bible, but once they start reading this content, do their eyes just glaze over, or are they stuck in the translation? I'm probably thinking it's the latter in a lot of cases, where it just doesn't seem to make sense, or it seems to be kind of shoddy instructions, to be honest, if you're not reading them correctly and literally. So if you ever try doing this with either drawing the things that are described in the Bible exactly how it says, or if you use physical props, it'll totally change your outcome of what you're trying to do. So we're gonna start here in Exodus 26. I'm gonna start in verse 7 actually. So I'm just gonna read what we have for King James text, and there's a few hiccups in it, but upon reading this, we'll look at it kind of analytically here and see why I think that this thing, the shape has been really misinterpreted here. So Exodus 26:7, and thou shalt make curtains of goat's hair to be a covering upon the tabernacle. 11 curtains shalt thou make. The length of one curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits. And the 11 curtains shall be of one measure. So again, all these the same size, measuring 30 by 4. So you got 11 of these things, right? And thou shalt couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves, and shalt double the 6th curtain in the forefront of the tabernacle. So again, we've got this idea of a covering upon in the forefront, and so it must be folded in the forefront. And so what is this upon really referring to? Typically they might represent it all like this. If you got 5 curtains and 6 curtains, then they take the last one and they fold it in half at the forefront. So you can see that ends up making an assembly that's 30 wide by 42 long, and this is assumed to be the roof. And we continue on Exodus here. And thou shalt make 50 loops on the edge of the one curtain that is outmost in the coupling, and 50 loops in the edge of the curtain which coupleth the second. Okay, so all of these 11 sheets have loops on opposite sides of them. So again, this long and narrow sheet, so loops on each side. What for? And again, what side of the sheet maybe? So which edge is the outmost? This is again King James language. So we've got the word in Hebrew actually is katsah, which is cut edges. And so if we know how to do loom weaving, you would know which edges that they would cut, and that would be actually on the short edges of the curtain. But So next verse here, and thou shalt make 50 tacks of brass, and put the tacks into the loops, and couple the tent together, so that it may be one. Again, so why go through all this hassle making 11 curtains only to then join them all together as one? What's the benefit of uniting it all like that? Next verse 12, and the remnant that remaineth of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remaineth, shall hang over the backside of the tabernacle. So this is again Exodus 26:10 through 12. But so here we have a reference hanging over the backside, and before it was talking about the forefront in verse 9. So kind of what gives here. So this is what they typically will present. Then they'll say, loops on each of the edges. There's 50 loops, and then we join it all together. Again, this is using a long edge joint, and so this is what you're left with, this shape. So, how else could we do this? Well, if we consider doing it with the different joints, instead of using the long edge, using the short edge, which again is the cut edge, or you could argue from King James standpoint is the outermost edge. What you have then is a very different orientation and a very different assembly. So we have to ask the question, what if all the short edges were joined? Because you have to remember that these curtains are made with each of them the same, and we have 11 of them, and on each of the edges you've got loops on the edges. And so how does this all come together? If we look at the text again, it says to put a group of 5 and a group of 6, and then again folding the last unit at the forefront of the tabernacle. So we kind of have what looks like maybe 2 halves. And again, the only way to literally interpret the text, realizing that each of the curtains has loops on opposite sides to join the adjacent one. The only solution that can yield is a polygon or a circle. So and again, we're bringing it together so that it may be one. So look at the dimensions of this, I guess, and this is something that caught my eye. There was, if each of these is 30 long and 4 tall, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times 30, so that's 300 cubits. And then I saw this next piece that you could fold in half, or that you were supposed to, you're directed to fold in half. So this is kind of where we're going. Well, it looks like it's a total of 315 cubits. Well, that's interesting, and that kind of got my brain spinning a little bit. But we also have another Hebrew detail here in Exodus 26:12. Curtains are to be installed over or around the tabernacle sides. Between over and around, you can use the same Hebrew prefix to describe either of those. So again, how it'll translates out, it's upon the top. Well, my shirt is upon my body. It doesn't make it elevation above my body, but rather just, again, up on. So we have this word upon in English, and we know in English even it has some variants. So what is this really, what are we talking about here? So if we look at verse 9, the 11th curtain is folded at the forefront of the tent, but the second half of the curtain is put in place at the latter or end of the process, not put at the back or the rear of the tent. So this is another language barrier problem where they're not realizing that the forefront of the tent, that the curtains are concluding at the latter portion. So it's basically talking about this last curtain being folded up in the forefront of the tent. So suddenly, again, what didn't make sense before, and you'll see inconsistency if you really want to study the shoebox traditional arrangements, you'll see them vary all over the map on how they present all that. There's nothing consistent about it. They like to take the position, it's like, well, all scholars, it's like the science is settled, all the scholars believe this. And it's like, well, no, not if you start paying attention to the details. So again, what is the length of this assembly? what are the other what other dimensional details are given? And this is maybe my favorite verse of the Bible by now. But so we have Exodus 26 verse 12 and 13 here. And a cubit on the one side and a cubit on the other side of that which remaineth in the length of the curtains of the tent. It shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side to cover it. Okay, so it's describing as overhanging on the sides or hanging over on the sides, and it's a cubit, you know, as far as total. So what we're talking about here is overlap. And so as you join all of these curtain ends together, you're going to have overlap at each of these points. You can't just butt them up next to each other so that they're touching. You actually have to overlap them, right? So now we take away 1 cubit for that, and suddenly look at our math. We take away that 1 cubit from 315 for our circumferential measure, and we're at what, 314. So when I saw this the first time, I mean, I chill go up my spine. I'm like, wow, this looks like the oldest, most accurate record of pi in human history, and in the plain text of the Bible. And from that, I'm like, I bet you this thing is round. And so I started studying from here. Let me see. So again, 314 is approximately equal to pi times 100. So again, pi being it's a ratio between a circle's circumference and its diameter. You know, the diameter being the length across, and the circumference being, you know, the length around it. So on every single circle, no matter how big or small it is, you know, if it's a circle in shape, you know, it'll be that ratio, the pi ratio. So again, what are the implications of this? You know, once you start to see that you are into a certain thought paradigm in your arrangements and your layouts, you realize how, you know, influenced and dictated you are based on those minor details. So what happens when we follow the other Exodus instructions and think outside the box? And that's exactly what I'm doing in my book here, The House of El Shaddai. And I've got a second one underway, the enhanced guide to the Exodus Tabernacle, or exploring God's house. And again, looking at how the pi constant was instrumental in not only discovering it, but it's embedded in it, when I say a number of different ways, numerically speaking, etc. So we're going to roll over to my book now, and I'm going to be showing you, I guess, the first chapter of what is Exploring God's House, to show you when we start with Exodus now and begin with this. So I'm just going to go through that first chapter here today. Let me switch to a different view. Here we go. So, okay, where am I at? Oh, I'm a little farther down. Okay. So if you guys have studied any Bible stuff, you'd have seen again what I call the shoebox model, and it's, I think, mystified a lot of people as far as why these drawings of the tent, you know, have a 4-layer roof. You know, and they're made with these big heavy beams on the side. And so if we were start by stripping this off, they use basically 2 layers of leather, and that bears out in the text. And then beneath that, they assume a layer of wool, and then also a layer of linen. So we're basically stripping this off, and we're going to be you know, transitioning these materials to be properly used. So I'm trying to bring context, because if any of you are familiar with the original tabernacle, or what's perceived to be the original tabernacle, this is where you know, we want to have a point of reference and a context. So And if you think about it, it's pretty crazy to have again a 4-layer. I don't know if you guys come in camping, you might have a screen layer of the tent, and then a fly or a waterproof shield above it. But to go with 4 layers, it's like, who would do that? Why would they do that? So it wasn't very hard to become a skeptic after I discovered the pi constant was sitting in the tabernacle description. So I'm going to go through Exodus, verse by verse here from Exodus 26:1. Moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with the 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet, with cherubim of cunning work shalt thou make them. And so again, this isn't the same set of curtains that we looked at. We were just talking about Exodus 26, 7 through 13, and now we're hitting the backspace, going back to Exodus 26:1, where it's talking about the curtains themselves. If it says moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains, it doesn't say with. The Hebrew could say with. They could put that preposition in there, but it says, and make the tabernacle 10 sheets of basically shesh mashzar. And so this idea of shesh mashzar, this is I guess look at that term a little bit. So what they're describing is in King James, they're saying twined linen cords. Well, twined, we think of twisted or twos, right? And it's actually shesh mashzar is how it starts. So we got the Hebrew word shesh. It's Hebrew for 6, which is interesting. They also translated as to describe fabric, like linen and possibly silk, other things. So if we look at the number 6 again, if you're taking a paired, a twined set of threads, you can see in here. If you got a set of 3 and a set of 3, that's shesh, that's 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's interesting, the Hebrew letters that spell the word shesh for 6 are related in this way. So I'm basically arguing the colors of this are stratified top to bottom, and I guess you'll see why, in that reason. Another thing, go to the internet, go and do a Google search on all the different colors that they present these tabernacle curtains as. They basically say, well, it's an artistic work, and the Hebrew word there again, shesh. I'm sorry, the ma'asah chashav. So it describes the curtains as being ma'asah chashav, or choshav rather. So you have this idea of a work, a cunning work. And a lot of Bibles will translate it as an artistic work, as if they're trying to make some elaborate decorative thing. And I'm not saying that this is in no way decorative, but what I'm saying is that it's a thoughtful work. These curtains are cunning because they're clever, because they're used for multiple purposes, and they are literally engineered hardware. I say that as an engineer, realizing that they have an engineering function in this structure. If you take a look at I've got a Ramban art scroll, and if you look at how many pages they dedicate to the curtains, verses like 1 through 13, they just ignore those verses as if they don't exist. Again, this is art scroll, Ramban, like a great within Judaism, and nothing to say. They don't start speaking about anything until the frame. So again, which part of God's word is unimportant, and so people tend to declare these are just curtains, it's just a bunch of fabrics, it doesn't matter. And again, this is where the corruption of thought begins. There's actually more text describing curtains within the Bible, within the Exodus account, than there are describing the Ark of the Covenant. And so when you understand that there's this much detail that's, I say dedicated to the curtains, you can have some appreciation. Again, we got 10 curtains that are measuring 28 by 4. So here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, we have the issue of stratification. And again, this is just a mock-up model that I had made to kind of show the kind of a summation of what others believe. And so you can say, well, I'm just making a straw man argument here. But go and compare. I don't care where you get your rectangular tabernacle source from. They all fall apart and they're all equally absurd. So, well, I shouldn't say equally. They're absurd in different ways. So again, we got these curtains that are to be joined in 2 sets of 5. So here we got the length of one curtain shall be 8 and 20 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have one measure. So again, making all of them the same, and 28 long. So the other ones were 30. These are 28. The other ones they made 11, and these are 10. So again, why do we have them measuring the size that they do? Why use multiples? So in the book, I kind of get into, well, if you're going to say it's round, this is why. If you're going to say it's rectangular, this is why they assume. So you guys can check these out and compare apples to eggs, if you will, because we're not comparing apples to apples. What they have is it's pretty rotten because it doesn't work. Here we got the Hebrew word hayiriyah. So I basically feature in this book, different words that have different technical significance in the scheme of this whole structure. So it uses not all the fabrics that are in the tabernacle are called yiriyah, which is interesting. But if you take a look at the Strong's definitions for it, it's referring to something that is trembling or quivering. And the idea of a tremulous hanging instead of just a hanging or a curtain. Usually you don't think of curtains for roofs or what have you, but coming arguably from ruah or yirah, this is getting into the function. So the same way that you'd have a vibrato, a shaking of a guitar string or a vocal cord or what have you. Here's a loom weaving guy who's basically weaving a curtain, but that as it's pulled, it's tension, and it would have the possibility to bounce, to flutter. And obviously, if you put it on this shoebox arrangement, you end up having, not only does it not flutter, because in this case they've added a whole plywood panel to the, it's not even plywood, that's really thick. If you, again, that's almost the height of a head. So they're looking at about a 4-inch thick roof. It must be heavy rainfall back then. I don't know. Maybe the snow, maybe the manna was going to crush the structure. Otherwise, I don't know. So getting into this idea of them functioning like that, or that being part of the description of what they are, that's something we want to remember. Again, it says the 5 curtains shall be coupled together one to another, and other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. And this is another detail that you see bear out, and I actually had that in the illustration back here. They're saying it's a group of 5 and a group of 5. So if you're putting it all together, a group of 5 into one, why does it matter? So as we continue on here, the Hebrew actually is referring Isha el Achota, this woman to sister. So these are literally being joined, woman to sister. So these curtains are feminine things, and you're kind of putting them side to side, like you might string up together a set of paper dolls. So again, you lose that in the English translation, this idea of both gender as well as interrelationship with another adjacent item. So in this imagery, what I do is I transform these along the way. You see the triangle there is for a change. So if we change this, we get our 3 layers of roof over our tabernacle structure. And we rearrange these so that they're joined end to end. Again, the cut end to the cut end. So you can understand now, knowing how a loom works, with you cutting these ends instead of these long ends. So if you're putting them together, cutting to cutting. And again, these are blue loops. So it's the blue loops that you're supposed to be joining together, and you're not You're not joining together red loops or purple loops. So again, why blue loops? So there's a lot of whys here that are just traditionally overlooked, and what they'll usually do is just put some symbolic meaning, oh, because blue is heaven and heaven ties all things together. I'm not saying that none of those explanations ever make any sense, but they end up grasping for straws in the sense of make it all figurative, make it all symbolic, and feel better about ourselves because we really don't know why. And this starts to outline a little bit more why. Exodus 26:4, and thou shalt make loops of blue upon the edge of the one curtain from this selvage in the coupling, and likewise shalt thou make in the uttermost edge of another curtain in the coupling of the second. So again, we're doing the same thing, taking the outermost edges and joining those together. And there's a little Hebrew nuance here again, where it's talking about to take the loops basically on or over safat, the hem, and then also basafat is so in the hem. And so we've got this idea of over the lip and in the lip. So if we look at the Hebrew, it's really referring to joining these together, in the lip and over the lip. And so when you understand that the loops are supposed to receive the loops, again, this is speaking to these being used in a structural capacity. Here we got Exodus 26:5. 50 loops thou shalt make in one curtain, and 50 loops shall make in the edge of the curtain that is in the coupling of the second, that the loops may take hold of one another. So you're tying loops to loops. And why? Because we are making this a structural thing. And where are they at? They're in the termination of the curtain, or the cut. Lulot b'kaitza hayirya. In other words, the loops in the end of the curtain, or the trembling curtain, maybe I should say. So again, if our loom is pulling these in the lengthwise direction, we got in fabric they have what they call the warp and the weft, and the warp is the long direction, and the weft is the side to side weaving. And so you're not cutting along the side to side weaving, you are cutting on the warp to bring an end to that. And then after that, you are putting loops on there. So we know how thick of curtains that we need to make based on the thread count and all that. So we got 50 blue loops up at the top, and then you'd kind of use the same size and number between the purple and the red. Mikbilot, we have this is from kabel. The Hebrew word kabel is arguably cable, is where we get our English word cable from. So the idea of receiving, again, here you got besafat, and here we got al-safat. So this is the one that's inside the house, or the bet is also for house, and al, which is upon, upon or over. So upon the lip or over the lip, and then in the lip, or interior. So we got an interior and exterior loop. Exodus 26:6. Of course, I guess let me just hit pause for a second. We're still yet to get anything to connect these two, and so again, we're making this loops, these loops in a way where we can tie this together to secure it, but it's not final because we don't have anything solid yet to hang it on. And thou shalt make 50 tacks of gold, and couple the curtains together with the tacks, and it shall be one tabernacle. Again, this is where the word tabernacle or dwelling place is first used, and it's the tabernacle. The one tabernacle is the idea, the one that's all together, all in one piece. We're basically taking in our two sets of 5. And then we are joining them all together so that it is all one. It is all united. It's a united ring, one loop. So again, this gives you a reason of why you're making why you're making a narrow and long strip of fabric to begin with is because you're making a polygon, either between polygons or circles. These are coming back together. So let's see. I'm not going to, I guess, getting into the Hebrew word for notebook is machberet, and here you have chavarta, which is a very it's the same root basically. So they're joining these together like you would a notebook, and so that's what's going on with this here structure. So with that first set of curtains. So again, that's the first set of curtains, and then we have the second set, which I've already discussed. Thou shalt make curtains of goat's hair, be a covering upon the tabernacle. 11 curtains shalt thou make. So again, why use 11 wool curtains over 10 linen curtains? Again, we're looking at an increased size. You remember these are larger now. So we have Yuriot, Ozim, Le'ohel. So this Hebrew word for Ozim it's translated as like goat or goat hair, and then it's also referring to that which is strong. So these outer barrier curtains are actually strong because they'd be making them pretty thick, really. So it'd be like a wool barrier. They actually do use wool in the Middle East to make tents. Desert nomad, but wool is used because it's good in weather resistance. So how does it look like when we're taking this off? So this is what they traditionally assume to be the second layer of the curtains, again installed over the tabernacle, where it's actually, they're omitting this idea of over the sides of the tabernacle. We got these grouped in a set of 5 and then also a set of 6. And oops, let me see here. Should I be reading this other verse here? I'm on verse 8. Go back to 8. The length of one curtain shall be 30 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and 11 shall be of one measure. So again, this is where we're getting our 4 by 30 and 11 of them in quantity. The Hebrew word for 11 it's an unusual spelling of the word for 11 that you don't find everywhere, but I think it's kind of referring to the idea of an afterthought. Okay, Exodus 26:9, and thou shalt couple 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves, and shall double the 6th curtain in the forefront of the tabernacle. So again, we have the question of like, where are we going to fold these things, and on which axis are we going to fold them, and on which end are we going to place them? Here we have kapalta al mul pene ha-ohel. So kapalta, this is where we get our English word couple from, is what I believe is getting into the idea of doubling. So al mul, which etmol in Hebrew is like yesterday, or getting in the idea of Revelation. Brit milah, the idea of a circumcision. So this language is also used in that kind of conjunction. So I talk about more hints. I've got a lot of work on the on how this resembles the human body, human anatomy. The whole tabernacle structure is designed that way. So again, we have the options of how are we going to make these, and so I'm basically unfolding them here because they're folding it in the wrong axis and putting it on the wrong end. And so if we got our 5 here and our 6 here, Exodus 26:10, and thou shalt make 50 loops on the edge of one curtain that is outmost in the coupling, 50 loops in the edge of the curtain which coupleth the second. So again, loops on both sides, and then our brass tacks, if you will, to basically make the final joint. So tacks being something like this, as far as being able to join loops together like that. And so now you can see the relationship of these two curtain sets. So this is the first one. I refer to these as the decagon curtains. These are the Mishkan curtains, or the tabernacle curtains. And this is the outer portion of this. I believe it's ultimately it's referred to as the Ohel Moed in part, or this whole assembly. But this this is actually the curtains that will be used for the courtyard. You have to remember, apart from some button-like or pin-like connectors for the last joint, We don't have anything to hang these on yet because the frame hasn't been introduced. So the basically you're using these buttons to make your last joint, or arguably make a point of entrance, like a doorknob. There's a reason you put a doorknob onto a door, and the same reason you're making something here that you can handle and disassemble. And here again, and the remnant that remaineth of the tent, the half curtain that remaineth shall hang over the back side of the tabernacle. Again, this back side, it's achore is achar is in Hebrew is later or after. And as far as it being the back, I would take issue with them translating that as back. So here we have the idea of stretching the overlap. So again, this is a Hebrew phrase, sorech, which sounds an awful lot like storech, and there's another rich, ruach is kind of in there in a different place in the text, actually. But if we're stretching this overlap, to over the dwelling place, so the dwelling place is established by these 10 linen curtains, and then the wool is being stretched over the sides of the tabernacle. And here we go again with the Exodus 26:13, and the cubit on one side and the cubit on the other side of that which remaineth, and the tent of the curtains, it shall hang over the sides of the tabernacle on this side and on that side to cover it. So we're left again with these two possibilities on how we're joining. We're either going to be making all these long edge joints, which in this case we don't have anything to connect these outer edges to, because remember these curtains have loops on both edges for interconnecting to an adjacent one. So again, that demands a cylinder or polygon or circle. And if you do it on the short edge joints, which are the cut edges, which is consistent with loom weaving, and for what would give you a practical explanation for assembling these in these strips, these long and narrow strips, because otherwise there's no such reason. So again, the math all works out where you've got a final circumference of pi. Now remember earlier I said how the scoffers like to bring up, oh, it's the courtyard's 100 long. Yes, it's 100 long. So we recall what the nominal diameter on a structure or a item that's measures 314 in circumference, right? The diameter of that's going to be what? 100. And so as we're putting these things over the sides, and alt sadi, the tabernacle, this word sadi in Hebrew, that is referring to the side. And so what do these look like when they're assembled? You got it. It's all sadi over the side of the 10 linen curtains. Again, different perimeters. I guess the last thing with the leather, it's interesting. Then the leather, there's no dimensions given, and the reason there's no dimensions given is because it would be hard to measure that with the tan skin. So that's kind of like a crash course through this first chapter. I know there's a lot of detail in this, and there's a lot of detail in that, and it's hard to grapple with, absorb it all if you haven't been pondering and picking at it yourself. So I hope that at least is an introduction. So this is an introduction, and right now again this is you can find this in my book on in the House of El Shaddai right now. If you want to get this guy, House of El Shaddai, that's available on my website or Amazon, and the Enhanced Guide to Exploring God's House, or Exploring God's House, the Enhanced Guide to the Exodus Tabernacle. That's what you just got a glimpse of. So I'm hoping to release this before not too long, because this again gives you a bit more Hebrew. So if you're intimidated by the Hebrew, this is what you would want to lean towards. And if you are wanting to get really in depth, this again goes into it verse by verse, and it basically features certain keywords and getting into the some of the engineering reasoning as far as why things are different way. And it's even to call it engineering is maybe a, we're just talking about basic counting at some points. I mean, if you can count and correlate, you can start to, it's logic, it's just deductive reasoning really. And so yes, there's some engineering involved with it, but not trying to intimidate non-engineer types and non-technical types but just to give you an appreciation for the text. And again, this is why I believe in having this this presentation called believing believing Moses Moses scriptures basically. That's why I'm convinced of this the way that I am, is because all these details, when you start to look at the Hebrew, they all bear out as being basically a brilliant design for what is ultimately a round facility and a domed structure. So it's really a magnificent thing. So getting into the idea of restoring the name, this is called the House of El Shaddai, and it's partly because of the word Shaddai. The numerics behind Shaddai is Shin Dalet Yud in Hebrew, which is basically the numerical value of those letters as they would use in ancient times would have been 314. So literally El Shaddai is the God of pi. So he's really got his stamp of eternity on this in this structure. So this is why one of the many reasons why it's important to restore this. We got, as part of the project, I've been recently working on an A scale model. We've got other small scale models in development as well. Hoping to make these available at the consumer level, so that people can do a hands-on. If you have a Sunday school, Bible school, whatever, maybe a Saturday, Bible fellowship type thing. Jewish or Christian. I mean, this isn't really intended to favor one side or the other on this content. It's just to show the raw the raw power of the text and the literal sensibility of it all. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to questions, a Q&A session.
All right, I've got a question on the curtains.
Mm-hmm.
The instructions say that each curtain has loops on two edges, opposite edges have loops.
You said the
right?
east curtain?
Well, each curtain has loops
each
on opposite edges.
Yes.
And all the curtains are to be connected together by the loops.
Yes.
So it doesn't say there's some curtains that won't be connected to anything.
Exactly.
It says all the curtains are connected to each other. But in the shoebox model, you've got a whole bunch of curtains hanging in the dirt with loops that aren't connected to anything, right?
Absolutely. Well, they do them. There's a number of different ways. Let me switch back into the PowerPoint here, because you can start to see the it's a mess on the fabrics. I mean, as far as dragging in the dirt, and you can see it in real life. How this stuff all wears, and it is very subject to when I say just fouling, it's there it is. So come on, there we go. Can you see that now? So they've changed this over the course of time. This is the I'm going to just get rid of that. There we go. Over the course of time, they've changed this. They had this laying, like fabric overlaying there, where you could see where it was like literally kind of laying and brushing in and against the sand. But normally they assume it's just one big panel with the fabric just hanging on, just draping over the exterior of vertical wood panels. That is their convention in that, and it does make a mess on the bottom. Obviously after it rains, we don't want to wick all that up, but the stuff, because it's blowing in the wind all the time, it's just like rubbing on the ground. So
right. So, but even so, these curtains, the edges aren't connected to the other curtains. They're
Right,
not
right.
connected.
So if you're only looking at connecting these curtain to curtain, and there's another image that I had of this in the presentation here. So if you see in this image here, you're in theory joining curtain to curtain with loops, right? Or you're tying them together kind of. And what you're doing is you are not only leaving the back ends open, but you're not necessarily having any other means of connecting it to a structure. So now that you've gone through all this effort to make uh, long, narrow strips of curtains that are now, essentially joined together by the loops, what then? If how then do you attach the whole thing? And this is why you see such variance on these different models. Let me go back to one of the models here. Here's case in point. This guy, it's just again drape, 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 drape. So if it's just nothing but loose and draped, is the wind going to catch that? Is it going to pick it up and pull it over? Or if it's not cinched down, there's no securing mechanism inferred based in their on their application of this a lot. Here's another, you can see a little bit of it draping over. Here's more draping over. So they always have these like really loose, limp looking curtains. Again, as opposed to like pulled taut, where it's something that can better flutter or quiver. So yeah, this is why in this Timna model, again, this is kind of a compromise. They put a small pitch in the roof, where it's otherwise normally flat, because realistically you would kind of need to do that. And there's different mechanisms by which they handle that from an interpretation standpoint. But this side, this whole side panel, in this case, they're stretching it out. Let me, of course, I've got that. I'm going to go back in that slide and take away that one picture, because there we go. You can see that edge a little bit better now, hopefully. But so as far as having it all cinched down with ropes, this is kind of what they're doing. And again, this, you can see where the steel is coming down to meet the ground. And normally they just kind of imply that this is tied to the side. That other Holman, the how would I call it? It's the A-frame style. The A-frame style, they do tend to show a lot of tension ropes along the sides of the structure that way. But with this Timna version, you can see them attempting to do it practically, and they kind of do. But if it's all laid over, and let me get my if it's all laid over the ropes or what have you, so here you can see the wind on the ribs. If we see the the rib structure, so normally if they're assuming there's just ropes coming down like that, or if they would actually pull that whole side, and tension it in some way, that's kind of where they're at, and it just doesn't make any sense once you start to study all that. And how are these curtains ultimately secured to the frame? That is a question that they just largely ignore it. They just said it's not important. We'll focus on the frame now.
Right. Plus, wouldn't on the other side of that, the back side, wouldn't there be a bunch of extra material folded up and laying on the ground?
Yeah, that ends up getting kind of really messy too. If you look at their, I'm trying to think of what I have for showing that detail. Let's see what the browser can bring up here. I have a lot of different images captured in my computer at some point, but here's Google image search Exodus Tabernacle curtains, and again, you can see this 4-layer absurdity. You can see all the color variation that I was mentioning before. And then on the back of this, kind of like you're alluding to, and I could probably even try typing in backside, as far as how it's it's almost like gift wrapping, right? There's just no way to wrap paper over a box without some folds. Backside. So will anyone have any detail on these folds? So again, here's this kind of hybrid arrangement, which is you're pulling down the stuff towards the ground, but here they got this laying loose and limp, and depending upon how much over the back side, they have different ways that they describe that over the back side of the tabernacle thing. I can't I don't see an image right off the top of my head here, but yeah, the way it would fold in or drape, it would kind of be bunching up. There's Project 314 stuff at Jeff's site.
Well, when I look at the dome model, it appears that would have natural convection and therefore ventilation throughout the structure. But when I'm looking at these pictures with all these layers on the shoebox model, it looks like it has very little ventilation, and it would be a super hothouse.
Yeah,
we had a guru up in Sedona a few years ago build what he thought was a Native American hothouse, and he built it wrong with too many layers, not near to the extreme this is. But when he put the people in it, several died.
Oh,
and I can't see how anybody could survive in this, especially in the summertime, for very long.
Well, I can tell you how they survive in this one. They have an air conditioning unit sitting in the back. So the Holy of Holies drops down a few degrees that way, but yeah, to your point, yurt is natural convection, and this is part of why some of the other descriptions are the way they are, is because this is there's provisions in the curtain sets for natural convection or ventilation. There's some measure of cord spacing, fabric spacing, so it would naturally be an opening for vent along the bottom. And you have to remember that as this large dome is being heated, it's going to make convection currents, and it's going to want to pull in that fresh air from the cool fresh air at ground level from the bottom. So but yes, to your point, very much so.
Can you go back to your the picture of your book? I guess the El Shaddai with the dome thing.
Yep. Well, I can bring up this one.
I was just wondering if that is that whole thing. That's the dome is over the whole sanctuary, and then the white part around is the outer court. Is that the case?
Yes, this is the outer courtyard. This is the one that measures 314 in circumference or in length. So the circumference is 314. The distance from side to side is 100. And again, that's where the length of the courtyard, they assume here that length is 100.
So that was the first curtain thing you did, and then you did one for the other one with the linen and the wool. Right? So the brown part, will that be the leather?
I'm sorry, the which part?
The whole brown dome part. That's leather.
Yeah, it's a single layer of leather.
I guess your book would go into more detail as you go build the structure and all that kind of stuff, huh? Because
but
I would imagine there have to be posts or something to carry the curtains on, right?
Right. Yeah, the curtains are basically all held up by means of posts, and these posts are described in the text. You have to understand the proximity of these things, the geometry, the quantity relationships. The same way if you got a tent kit back at home and you
Yeah.
Or if you go out camping and you dump all the contents out in the bags and you say, well, I got 6 stakes here, and look at this at the bottom of the tent floor. I've got 6 loopholes to, it doesn't. You don't have to be a genius or a rocket scientist to figure out. Now I have to put these stakes through these little fabric loops that are fashioned on, or maybe metal, that are fashioned onto the floor. They're stitched onto the floor of your tent. So you
Right.
have very similar things going on here with this tent design. But yes, between the leather, it's described as like upper leather, and the other leather is, it's the reddened leather, or the earthened leather. And so this idea of upper and lower, again, it doesn't describe lower leather, but one would infer logically that if the upper leather is one way, then it doesn't make mention of the lower leather. Then the other leather that's talking about would logically be lower leather. So,
Right.
so the text is a lot of that because it's very efficient in its use of language. It's very compact. You're basically able to, basically design a whole tent structure or describe it in a paragraph, basically. So, as far as all the different components and all the functions, it's all in there, and it's genius, in that regard. So.
Yeah. So I guess your book goes into more detail. So I just have to get the book.
Yeah.
Can I ask you also, are you a structural engineer?
I'm mechanical.
Oh, mechanical. Okay.
Yeah. So we do go through, static analysis of structures, getting into, a little bit of fluid stuff with wind loading and all that. Structural guys are specialized in housing, and so,
Yeah.
I was not practicing in this capacity in my profession. I was working mostly in energy type stuff, but the core disciplines, the math, the strength of materials and static analysis is really most of where all this goes down to, and between statics and strength of materials. And we have very similar core curriculum content in that regard. So yeah, we can do each other's work sometimes. So
I have to say it's very fascinating. It kind of causes me to rethink my thinking. So, and it does make sense, really, when you really think about it. So, thank you very much.
yeah, sure thing. Yeah, when you start putting reason back into religion again, it becomes a very different thing. And religion outside of reason is really, it's insanity. And I want no part of that. To be honest, it's there's times where we have to be, have faith in things that we don't understand, and faith in the commandments in that regard. But you also, the idea that commandments exist in a construct or paradigm apart from ration, apart from reason, to me, the idea is appalling and absurd. So I believe that all commandments are for reasons, and sometimes we just have to think a little harder to deduce what these reasons are. So,
Andrew, do you think Solomon would have been motivated to build a temple like the first temple?
When you say Solomon temple like the first temple, do you mean the tabernacle, or the temple like the tabernacle?
Well, the first tabernacle, the tabernacle. That he would have emulated it, or what do you think about that?
I think that David, David was building it. The plans came from David, and people usually don't realize that. Everyone thinks it's Solomon. Oh, he's a super wise and smart and really well educated guy. But the plans themselves are Davidic in origin. They are. It sounds like, the Spirit told him to do this the way that it's translated. And I wrestled with that for a number of years. And because on one hand, you have this case of Moses, and thus saith Yod He Vav He, build it like this and like that. And, this is very exacting, very exacting language, and very deliberate, very purposeful. And then suddenly you get to this account of the temple, and you have two accounts of the temple. One is in Second Chronicles 3, and the other one is in First Kings 6 or 7, or maybe spanning both, I forget. And as I understand, Orthodox Jews regard, I want to say, was it Chronicles or the I can't remember it off the top of my head here, but I think that they reject the King's account as being non-reconcilable, and the Chronicles account being the true account of the temple. And if you get into authorship, kind of like the books imply, you've got Kings and Chronicles. Kings is written, kind of by or for, or in conjunction with Kings, and Chronicles is understood to, or is believed to be penned by Ezra, or tabulated by Ezra, where he's putting more of a prophetic and also priestly bent on things, because the book of Chronicles, it's a lot less forgiving on the kings as the book of Kings. You see omissions and stuff like that in the book of Kings. It's like, oh, we don't want to talk about that part right here, right now. And so between Kings and Chronicles, there are those differences, but they're very different accounts. It's as if two people are giving you two different surveys, and so they have a hard time reconciling them. And I think that both of them can be reconciled. I think that this is the key to doing it, because I think that they would have been building in accordance with the same pattern. And the text that is in Chronicles, talking about David, how he had the plans that the Spirit put into his mind, or something like that. To me, it sounds more like this plan from David was more a matter of what David had by the Spirit deduced from the texts. So that's a quite the contrast in mode of divine divine revelation. If we were to infer things from the texts, we can do it, and arguably we can do it often and successfully and frequently, and it can make sense. But just because someone reads the text doesn't mean they understand it. And I'm not saying David didn't understand it, but what I'm saying is that there's a far cry from that and raw revelation, where it's like, thus saith the Lord, and all I'm doing is repeating exactly what he told me. There's that level of prophetic revelation, and I don't, from that description in the way that it's read out in English, it's like he was doing everything that the Spirit had put in his mind, or in his heart, or whichever, I forget. But this notion that this is divinely inspired in this way, that and this is really going to the heart of the matter. The text is talking about, David's like, oh, I want to build you a house, and then Nathan the prophet's like, okay, yeah, go and do it, because the Almighty's with you. And then like the next day or shortly thereafter, he comes back to David and says, or wait, are you the one to build a house for me? I will build a house for you. So this narrative, it switches. It says, when did I ever say to my, the people, or to the guy who's shepherding my people Israel, I want you to build me a tent of cedar. I've been living in a tent, quite contently. Thank you very much. That's the sentiment out of the text. And so I think there's a little bit of a conflict of interest when people say that, oh, it was Solomon who was supposed to build it, and he was pleased with Solomon doing that. When the plans came from David, the money came from David. We're talking about the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars in gold, in silver, and taxes of adjacent nations that funded that first temple. I mean, it's something ridiculous. Like in today's dollars, that kind of gold and silver could have. I figured it out. It's enough to buy everyone in the 5 least populous states in the union to buy them a new home. of all the families, or it's another way to put it is between one or two. I think it was you could build 2 NFL stadiums in every state of the union with the same money that David got for, had laid aside for the temple. And so that temple was very expensive. And part of this narrative on oh, now I'm going to change my mind. I told you that I wanted to live in a tent, and now I guess I just changed my mind. Now I'm happy with this temple in Jerusalem instead. Good idea, David. Thank you. You don't see that. The text doesn't bear that message out, and there's this little hint that they want to take and say, well, now it's in Jerusalem. I mean, this is a very Jewish narrative, as opposed to the other tribes of Israel, because originally, the tabernacle was in Shiloh, and Shiloh was in the country of Ephraim, is in the hill country of Ephraim, as opposed to being in located in Jerusalem. And so after it had fallen from Shiloh and everything had moved at that point, I mean, you have to remember all the political turmoil between the time of Samuel and Eli, I should say Eli to Samuel, to Saul, to David, to Solomon, to Jeroboam, Rehoboam. That whole period, there was a lot of religious upheaval in that time, and there was a lot of shifting in the power center from the priesthood into the monarchies, and the monarchies kind of collapsed. Most people don't realize that this tent, Solomon decommissioned it at 480 years. It was 480 years after they had left Egypt, where Solomon said, all right, I'm commissioning the temple, and at the same time I'm decommissioning the tabernacle. And that decommissioning of the tabernacle, I think was a huge mistake from a national historical standpoint. I mean, I would think it's almost offensive. I mean, it is offensive, because he's like, here, this is my structure, build it this way. This should have at least been a memento of something that came out of Egypt, right? I mean, saying, hey, this testifies to the fact. And it's like, well, we don't need that anymore. Talk about replacement theology. And if I mention this to Jewish communities, they're more likely to raise an eyebrow on that. Next year in Jerusalem, the temple in Jerusalem. So between this distinction between the temple and the tabernacle, I think there is a really distinct one. And I think if the Almighty has his preference, if El Shaddai has a preference, I would say he would prefer the tabernacle over the temple any day. So anyway, that's kind of my rant on that. And, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions here?
Oh, we just had a question on the size of the dome temp. I guess that's the Holy of Holies, right? As opposed to, or not the Holy of, just the whole structure just seems so much larger than the traditional structures, and the just a lot more fabric, I guess.
It's mostly leather. There's
mostly leather, yeah.
Yeah. As far as the differences between the two structures, actually, they use more wood, believe it or not. So, this structure
in the traditional one, more wood in the traditional one, you mean?
In the traditional one, yeah, they use more wood. They use 3 times the wood almost.
Oh.
And let me see if I have this up. I can bring up this guy here. And Exodus 26:15-ish. So this is part of where they go awry, and this is part of fulfilling their own paradigm here. So here we have Exodus 26:15 and 16 or 16. 10 cubits shall be the length of a board, and a cubit and a half shall be the breadth of a board. Okay. So how many dimensions is lumber usually called out in? It's usually 3 dimensions. It's a 2x4. You might say 2x4, but it's either going to be a 92 inch or a 96 inch or what have you, right? whether you're using it for studs or you want an 8-footer. But we need that final dimension. And so here they're starting with the 10 cubits, which is great, shall be the length of a board, and 1.5 cubits shall be the breadth. It should be the width. So we're talking 10 long by 1.5 wide by question mark thick. Okay, well, how do you build something if it's spec'd out at question mark thickness? You can't. You have to have a reason behind that. And so what they do here is, rather than realizing it's a cubit, a cubit and half the cubit, rather than seeing it as a three-dimensional thing, they're basically translating this as two-dimensional. And that what it does is it increases the overall width of the board, which is only supposed to be, 1 in one dimension and 1/2 in the other. So we're looking at a plank that is 10, and I deal with this in my books too. So it's 10 by 1/2. I'm sorry, 10 by 1 by 1/2, and they're just saying it's 10 by 1.5, and they need that 1.5 to extend the length of the panel to match the crazy fabric arrangement. And so that's why they translate it as a two-dimensional thing, and then they just assume that this third dimension. So what they end up with in most of the design concepts that they show are shown as where the thickness is 1, and the in one direction it's 1.5, and the other it's 1 cubit, and so it's 3 times fatter than it needs to be. And so the dome is actually, as far as ton for ton, it's a lot less. And if you start looking at, the only thing that you're using a whole lot more of is leather, but other than that, so you use more leather. The floor area ends up being 17 times larger. And so again, in the spirit of tent making, you make a tent to span as much space as you can with as little frame as you can. You want to have little frame because it's a weight thing, and it's the frame gets in your way and all that. So all you want is covering, really. Nobody wants a tent frame. Tent frame by itself is kind of useless. But and so this is why it's so absurd from an engineering standpoint, because no culture in the world has done that. And you can say, well, Israel's special, and Israel's got, if the Almighty wanted it that way, then he could have made it that way. It's like, really, you want to have him have his people hauling around all this stuff and for what? To have a thick wood wall with a fabric roof? What kind of sense is that? There's no sense in that. Yet that's what they propose that we accept.
So 2 questions. So you're saying that the fabric on the dome or the leather is a lot more than what was called for in the instructions?
No, there is no dimension given for the leather. That's Exodus 26 verse 14. You'll find that, and there is literally zero. Here, I'll bring that in. There is literally 0 dimension called out on 26:14. And thou shalt make a covering for the tent of ram skins dyed red, and a covering above of badger skins. And so again, azur is the tachshim. That is an animal in question, but it doesn't change the fact we're given no dimensions here, and we're given 2 types of leather. So we've got the reddened leather, which is lower, and then the covering above, which is again the azur, the arot azur. I'm sorry, arot tachshim.
The other question I have is
no size given there.
So the Ezekiel temple, is it misunderstood too, or what are your thoughts on the Ezekiel temple?
There is a guy who's they say he's a Christophiladelphian. Let me let's see. There's a guy named Hully who there we go. there's a religion called Christophiladelphians, and they floated around. I think there's still a few today, but 100 or 200 years ago, there's a guy named Hully, and this is his depiction of the temple, and the reason he made it round is because of one word, and that word is Saviv. And this word Saviv, we can actually find this in Exodus 27 as well. And so, why he did this with only, he came to this perception only with this, and didn't apply his line of thinking backwards a little bit. Where is Saviv here? Saviv right there. All the pillars round about the court. So right there, the King James people even should be a little content with me here when it says roundabout. So I would agree with roundabout. Saviv, and look at how Saviv is spelled. Samik bet yud bet. So what do you have with there? You have the samik, which is a circle, or it's represented as a tack sometimes. And this is what you'd use to point a peg into the ground if you're going to ascribe a compass around it. And then you've got the bet and the bet. What are the bets? So it's two houses, or in this case, two half houses. Well, which you'll start to see once you understand that the pattern. This whole thing is called out in two houses and two half houses. So, I think that this tabernacle is literally the fulfillment of Ezekiel's two-house prophecy. When it talks about bringing together Ephraim and Judah together, into one thing. So there's a beam in this structure that runs contiguously, from end to end, from the south half to the north half. So you got the south half of the house, the north half of the house, and through there is a contiguous piece. It's one stick when the whole house is standing up together the way it's supposed to be. And so you see this amazing two-house of Israel prophecy, and two houses reunited into one. When you start to look at that, again, the Ezekiel passage, and it talks about what seems to be when the Mishkan is restored to the land. It sounds like it's again reinstalled in the hill countries of Israel. So,
what verse is that in Exodus there?
Well, I'm looking right now in Exodus 27:17, Saviv. So where are these, these people who want to scoff at me with the rectangular, saying, well, this is 50 by 100. Where are they when they read the word Saviv? Round about. The pillars shall be round about the court.
Same.
Where are they then?
In your book, we have a copy of your book here. Dave's got on page 97. Is that the beam you're talking about?
That sounds in the right vicinity.
So that's the structure. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
It's a rib structure.
And then Mark says the same word is in Jeremiah 31. 22. Jeremiah 31:22. What's the word again?
Tesovev. It's the roots of that.
Tesovev.
31:22. Tesovev. So it's the same root anyway.
Yeah.
It's circle. Yeah.
So that encompasses the idea of circle.
Yeah. That's not boxy language. If we are done, I thank you for your time and interest here today, and hope that you guys be interested in between buying a book and or supporting the project. Again, this is the only dare I say ministry of its kind, where as far as the Tabernacle research restoration, it's I'm not affiliated with any particular church or Jewish group or Messianic group or whichever. Have a number of people who are working in various capacities So, more volunteers are good to have on board. But, physical support is the word for it is fungible, in that it's more flexible. I can you can't always get exactly the volunteers. You can't dispatch volunteers quite the same way you can with funding. So it's to try to expand the scope and the reach of this project. Looking at a lot of different angles. Between marketing and video development, and of course, Ward is working on CGI, and so there's a lot of elements of research and everything like that, that are going on behind the scenes, even though you don't see day in and day out posting and publishing on everything, because the nature of this work and research. I'm trying to put out as high a production quality as I can wherever I can, and so that's another, the project can only be as great as, well, the Almighty wants to make it, of course, but with us as well, if we're seeing something and not saying something, then we're kind of, we can be implicated in guilt in these things, I guess, sometimes, and so I've felt obviously very compelled once I made this discovery of its roundness to just take it to, I don't want to say the bitter end. I think the end is going to be sweet, and I think that making physical models is part of the testimony that needs to happen. The same way that the Ark Encounter folks make a full-size ark. It's like, well, why would you do that? And I kind of have joked in the past that they spent $100 million on a boat that won't float for a flood that won't happen. But the reality is it is a witness. It is testimony. As it is in the days of Noah. Arguably, are we in the days of Noah? And the rediscovery of this tabernacle. And I personally think it has more truth to reveal than what's been locked up in the Dead Sea Scrolls, or if you want to speculate in a conspiratorial way and say the Vatican vault, or what have you. There is a lot here as far as revelation, and first of all, people don't want to study the Peshat because they say, well, why does this matter? This doesn't matter because it's all done away with. And it's like, well, if that's how we're going to handle divine writ, saying it doesn't matter because now is now and then was then, I think that's pretty short-sighted, and so I'm hoping that to get as many people on board, trying to further the reach of the project and the scope of what we can build and do. Again, the more volunteers, the more funding, the better production and the better revelation, the better reach, etc. So obviously Israel, when they were returned from Babylon, they had the option. They were bankrolled to build the temple. They had the money, and they took the boards from the temple and they started building their own houses with it. So as 15 years went by where nothing happened, and then the prophet Haggai, again, Hagi, right? This idea of my circle, my feast, arguably, comes and speaks to the people and saying, hey, you people are going bankrupt because you're not putting money, you're not bringing food into my house, type thing. And so as we allow the house of the Almighty to sit idle and into a realm of theoretical irrelevance, I'm basically appealing to you guys in that sense. If the restoration of the sacred name is important, then this is the sacred place where he puts his name. I mean, this is a very I think important discovery here. So again, hoping that you'll find interested in supporting this in one way or the other. And again, thank you for time and attention today, and wish you all well. Thanks.